right, I'd like to call it the whole meeting, excuse me, for Monday, April 15th, 2024. Order, roll call, please.
Mayor Gaffino.
Here.
Trustee Christensen.
Here.
Trustee Curtis. Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Lowry.
Here.
Trustee Nedredge.
Here.
Trustee Salazar. Here.
All right, audience comments? Trustee comments? Item 1, Steve, under discussion.
Okay, so my packet just froze up. Thank you, Nathan. Item number 1 is a draft budget follow-up. So this is part of our budget process where we do our overview in March. Then the second meeting in March, we do more of a department overview, more granular. This is the behind the scenes after the second review by the board. There's always some tweaks and changes to small things like we might look at something and say, oh, we just got better pricing back and it's not going to be 8,000, it's going to be 10,000 for this. So what Jason does at this meeting is kind of gives you an update on anything that was finalized since the last meeting, just so you see it again. And if you have any comments, please ask. And then what we do is we bring it back in May for approval. And this would be, wouldn't necessarily be the last time, but if the board has any ideas, this would be a good time to bring them up because technically the next time you see it will be for the vote. So with that being said, Jason's going to walk us through it.
Okay, there's only been really a few changes I want to go over now. The first of all, here's our general fund. We went through kind of the revenues and just looked at where things were based on over this past month of where we thought we were. Just a couple of quick changes. Income tax, we raised that $5,000 just based on money coming in. Video gaming tax revenue, we raised it $6,000. And then on the community development side, they asked for more additional training for $1,000. So basically, we increased revenues by $11,000, expenditures by $1,000. So the budgeted change went up by $10,000 from $50,810 to $60,810. And we had a couple minor changes to some position titles. The business services manager, that was formerly the business and administrative services manager. So we got rid of the administrative services portion. The community and board relations coordinator, we got rid of the board relations part. So now that's just community relations coordinator. And the information technology assistant, we changed that to information technology / GIS analyst in the budget.
And I should say those first two, last year when we combined those positions and we created them, the titles were all encompassing. The job duties haven't changed for either one of those. I just realized that I overthought it last year. And when Mike presents his card to people, it's so long. And 90% of his job is business stuff. So we just took the administrative part out. And same thing with Natalie. People know what a community relations coordinator is. So just having the board in there, she still works with the board, still puts out the packet, but we thought it would just clean it up.
And moving on to the special service area fund, as mentioned earlier tonight on the Oak Hill SSA, we added $10,000 for the pond review to figure out what some of the solutions are there. So we saw the net change there go from a $1,130 net increase to a $8,800 decrease in that fund just by adding that money there. Moving to the capital projects fund, because of the positive referendum vote, we are increasing the non-home rule sales tax revenue by $1,283 million. We did our original estimates and why we originally said that 1.4 million is probably what it's going to bring in. When you look at this next upcoming budget year with the tax being July 1st and this budget year starting June 1st, we do have 1 month. It's going to fall next year where we're kind of at the old rate. So it didn't go, we're not budgeting to go full amount this next year. And we added $50,000 for veterans memorial improvements. So there we saw the capital projects fund go from a $2.8 million decrease down to a $1.6 million decrease. So additional revenue there from the referendum helped there. And on the water fund, we had some projects that we originally had in there at $16,000 for the east and west treatment plants, the HVAC units. Those are going to be more in the $20,000 range. And then we added money for the risk and resiliency assessment and emergency response plan update for $25,000. So we saw the change there, just under $3.3 million decrease to a little over a $3.3 million decrease there, just from those additional expenditures we added. There is going to be some additional things when we come back to the next meeting, obviously with the road program approved tonight. The budget number we had in there originally was a little bit higher, so we'll bring that down. And then there might be some additional things that over the next week or two, if we kind of tighten up here. So these are pretty much the changes we'll bring back, and that's it.
And the one thing I will point out is when Jason and I went over this, it gets a little confusing, but when it says budgeted decrease, but it's actually showing an increasing number, it's actually showing that we're actually it's the reserve. So by adding more expenditures in, you're actually decreasing the amount of money in our reserves, which is why the number goes up, but the word decreases in the sentence.
So with the road program, since it was what, 800,000 or 700,000?
The road program?
Yeah.
It was only about
400?
300,000 less.
How much?
Yeah, it was about 300.
Are you looking to do any other one-offs since we have some money there to do, or is that not enough? Or
I mean, typically to do one-offs, you'd have to have them engineered. So right now we don't have any other roads
Okay.
engineered. So typically what that does though, is it can go back into, it goes right back into the capital fund. So next year, if we look at it, there are years, I'm just gonna go ahead a little bit here. But some years, like when we start doing Tanner Trails on the west side in a couple of years, that's a huge subdivision. So it's going to take multiple years. So what we like to do is we try to hit that mark around 2 million for roads, but having extra funding in our capital fund allows us to say, you know what, this year we're going to do 2.5 or 2.6 to try to get out of a big neighborhood so they're not being inundated.
all right, thank you. Any questions for you? Nope. All right, item two.
Thank you. So item 2 is, Mary, you just led a perfect segue into this discussion, which is talking about our public works funding, but that's right out of the capital budget. So what we're going to go through tonight is Jason has put together a really nice presentation with the Public Works Department. I'm going to go through the first part, and then Jason's going to go through the second part. The first part is just an overview of the project. The second part is going to be more of the funding options. And I will tell you that a lot of the things that went back and forth, clearly there was discussion about whether or not this building would be built with a referendum or could be built without a referendum, but then the referendum passed. So then that answered that. Of course, then there was the caveat of all the grocery taxes is, potentially going away. And if that goes away, do we have enough money in the capital? So the referendum passing created some unique opportunities for funding where we're not going to see an operational issue. And Jason's going to go into the option. What I will say here is we have Jack Hayes and Fred Morano from Frederick Quinn. They are our construction manager for the Public Works project. So if any time at the end of this presentation, you have any questions specifically about the Public Works building, the construction process, the timing of it, or the cost, they would be the ones who'd be able to break that down. With that, Jason, would you please? Okay, so the first slides, and I want to make this clear. We know that John Laskowski is not with the village anymore, but he used to always make the joke that he's like, you put just enough information on a slide so no one can see it. So we did this on purpose just to show you that that is a combination of all the categories that basically culminate into one Public Works project. And Frederick Quinn puts together that schedule based on the architect's designs. And what we actually did is this is actually pared down where we combine some that are similar so we can fit it on a page. But ultimately, when you see all those categories, that's what adds up to a current estimated price at 18.8 million. Now, the last time we talked, the estimate was at 17.6. We said the estimate would probably going to go up to at least 18. That's what we've always said for debt purposes, based on the fact that the estimate was given last year. There was no inflation added for this year yet. And we hadn't, without the site plan being finalized until a couple months ago, you didn't know what site work needed to be done as far as the amount of dirt that needs to be moved, offsite, removed, excavation costs, all that. Now, what I will tell you is that number was actually higher, but Frederick Quinn and the architects from Williams sat with Brian, myself, and some other people on the project, and we sat in a room for a couple hours, and we already started taking things off the project that weren't going to hurt the operational aspect of the building in any way, but just finding some things like maybe we look at how many windows we have in the building, and do we need that many windows, and what's the savings if we took some windows out, things like that. So we got it down to this number. It's possible that that number could still drop again. So we just started looking at that number more tightly about a week and a half ago once we got the new number. So with that, the next slide, please. So what's unique about the way that we do this project, and I think it's becoming more common with municipalities who are looking to get the best pricing, is instead of bidding the project as one whole project, so build me a public works building and, and here's what it looks like. And then you come back with one price, $20 million. Instead, what you do is you break up every single aspect of the building into a different bid package. So you end up with, I think we said 25 or 30 bids, somewhere around there, individual bids. So each one gets bid separately. Each one has its own list of bidders. And this way, you're making sure everyone meets your qualifications, but then you're still picking the lowest price in each category. Whereas if you hire, let's say, one company, their subcontractors, there might be a markup for subcontractors. Here, you're telling each individual aspect for HVAC, plumbing, things like that, give us the best price. This is the HVAC for the building. Frederick Quinn oversees that construction. They'll be on site during the day, 40 hours a week overseeing the project. They just make sure it's installed properly. Next slide, please. So this is the current timeline. And as I once told John Laskowski in the past, is these timelines always change. This is the most recent one. And I think as of this morning, it changed. So we are in it's fairly tight to this. But right now, one of the cost saving measures we're looking at, and I'll get to that in a second, is the type of brick we use on the building. That by doing brick, whether the architect decides to redesign the building with a different type of brick, that takes a week or two for their designs, or the architect is suggesting, and we haven't made a decision yet, the architect has said, what if we just bid the cost saving brick as an alternate? And so when the bid package goes out, you look at the original brick, then you have your cost saving brick, and then you can see the price difference and then choose which one you want at that time. The caveat to that is it still takes them 2 weeks to design the alternate bid package. So either way, you're pushed back a week or two, no matter what, from this schedule. But that brick could have a savings of a couple $100,000. So based on this schedule, as you see, our big thing is we have a lot of things lined up. You have the PUD tonight to discuss with the land swap with the SKCTA. And all of that is expected to come back to the board on May 6th for approval. Potential land swap, that would be the PUD for the actual building to be developed. And then soon after that, we get ready to bid the project, and you could actually begin construction by end of summer, early fall, with a projected goal. And I'm just going to say, based on today's numbers, probably December of 25, somewhere in that range is the goal, is to be up and running by January 26. Next slide, please. So we put some slides in just to remind the board of kind of what it looks like, but this hasn't been updated yet. As you know, the site plan has the Salt Dome in a whole new location off to the east of the building. Right now, you're standing on the north side of the building looking at it. So the Salt Dome is actually going to go closer to our current building, which is the building on the what is the middle upper corner. But so we just wanted to put the overview so that you could see everything around there. All those teal roofs, that's our current public works building. That's our current water treatment facility. There's our water tower, and we'd be sliding the Salt Dome over. And in the back, you see the containers. That's where the training facility is for the SKCTA. Thank you, sir. And then this is zoomed in a little bit more. So now you're getting to see the general shape of the building as designed. One of the things to point out is I think Williams did a nice job with the building. Looks architecturally aesthetic in the back, but it actually reduced the cost. So we've said that before, but the roof line, it looks unique and people think unique means more expensive. But in our case, what they did is they tapered it down in a way that it reduces the amount of cement needed for the walls, which basically lowered the roof to the lowest points you could in order to save on cost of cement. And next slide, please. And then this is roughly what the front is right now. And we haven't really gone through the brick yet, but just since you see a picture of it, what they're looking at doing is that is brick that is basically laid 4-inch thick brick on the front of the building. There is an alternate type of brick, which is still brick. It's 2 inches thick. But what it does is it actually gets molded with this is layman's terms, and they dummy it down for me. So it sounds like it gets molded in with the actual cement when they do the precast concrete, and it's one piece then, and then the brick is actually molded into it and it's put up. The difference is you get the brick still looks like brick. The difference is you get computer brick, I call it, which means you have perfect mortar lines and everything. Whereas when you do natural brick, like where it's being laid by hand, the difference in the mortar actually gives it more of like a human touch to it. But we are looking at a way to reduce cost by looking at that engineered brick. Okay, next slide. And then this is the back of the building. This is the actual garage area. The brown that you see in the front is the extension of our building to the east. That is where the new fleet area would be for our mechanic, and all the places that we would do our maintenance. And then in the back is your actual garage. Technically, the garage has 2 doors on each side. You see a third door at the bottom. That third door is actually our wash bay. So that's where the trucks would go in. You can fit 2 at a time. They get cleaned up. One of the things that Brian and his crew pride himself on is our trucks always look clean because they clean them and they maintain them well. But now we don't have a wash bay now, so this would add a wash bay. Next slide. Okay, so now Jason's going to start going about the funding.
So our capital projects fund is a very healthy reserve right now. We'll probably end this current fiscal year in the $13 million range. So when we're looking at how to fund this building, it's going to be a combination. What we're looking at is a combination between debt and basically using some of the money we have on hand to try to save some money on interest and not take on all the debt. The bonds we're looking at are going to be alternate revenue source bonds, so pledged with their non-home rule sales tax. Basically, the new money we're going to get from this extra 0.5%, we're projecting at $1.4 million. So this is money that's going to go towards debt to pay for this building. We're trying to keep that debt payment in the $1 to $1.2 million range, just so we make sure we have enough of a cushion there of the new money coming in that can more than handle any debt money going out. So we're looking at kind of 20-year terms. And right now with interest rates, we're looking at 4.5% to 5%. I mean, I'm obviously hoping it comes in under that, but just worst case scenario, I'm kind of looking at 5% is kind of the number we're playing with. But also our main goal here is to maintain an adequate capital reserve fund balance. So we want to make sure there's money on hand, like Steve mentioned earlier, if there's a larger street project we want to do, we have that money, or if we bid out a project and it comes in way under budget, we have enough money there and reserve to basically be able to handle something coming in way more than we thought it did. So I'm just going to show you a few options here. We went through many different ways, whether it's borrowing the full $18.8 million or borrowing $10 million and using 8.8 of reserve. But these are kind of the ones we kind of settled on, and I'll get into some of the reasons in a minute. But basically here in this first column is how much debt we're going to be using. I'm going to focus on this $14 million. So if we're going to borrow $14 million, that means we're going to use about $4.8 million of money we already have on hand. So I'm projecting in this column the 20-year at 5%. So basically a debt payment, annual debt payment of principal and interest in $1,123,000. Assuming we had that, and based on the money coming in and the various projects we already have lined up, or we kind of know about where we have lined up, that's going to give us a capital reserve over the next 5 years, about $6 million. So that really gives us the most flexible option that we could see right now. As I mentioned, that projected debt payment of $1,123,000 still leaves us $277,000 more in the new tax money versus what our debt is. So if tax revenue ever went down, it could go down 20%, and we'd still basically have enough of the new money to cover that debt payment. So it gives us plenty there. It also allows the gas and utility tax. I mean, that's one thing that came up in the past of that money coming into our capital projects fund. But that money gets to stay there. It doesn't have to get used for any of the debt payments. It just keeps going towards paying a lot of our capital projects. And I mentioned the $6 million reserve over the next 5 years. Our capital projects fund doesn't have a reserve or a minimum number to say, here's how much we need to keep by policy within our capital projects fund. It really just says, amount sufficient to be able to fund our long-term capital projects. But if you look at that $6 million, I mean, that could be anywhere from 2 to 3 years of an annual road program we have always in reserve. So that's a number that we feel comfortable with to keep in our reserve. And one thing I'm going to get into here a second is this also assumes we're going to use some of the capital reserve money to pay off the police department debt that we currently have. And really this idea kind of came up in tandem with the grocery tax elimination, thinking that the grocery tax could take away up to $700,000 from our general fund in sales tax revenue. And that police department debt is pledged sales tax is what goes to pay for that money. So every year, the general fund sends over to the debt service fund $640,000. So we figure if we could eliminate that $640,000 coming out of our general fund to help pay that police department debt, that'll basically offset whatever money we lose from the grocery tax. Currently, there's $2,940,000 or $1 million left on the balance of 5 years left on that. Plus, we have a $44,000 and $100 interest payment due on July 1st. So what we're thinking that this current year general fund, we're probably going to end up with a $1.9 million surplus is what we're looking at right now. And that's in addition to the $600,000 that we already budgeted. So basically, if that money we transfer over to the capital projects fund and we earmark that and say, well, that's money that we're going to take out of there again and pay off the debt within the police debt service fund, we have about $297,000 of just fund balance reserves that are kind of sitting in there. So we'll use that. Plus, we might have to take another $187,000 out of the capital projects fund. So basically, you know, surplus money from the general fund this year, money that we have on hand from our debt service fund, and a little bit of money from our capital reserve could basically take that debt and pay that one off so that there's no more debt coming out of our general fund. As I mentioned, annual savings to our general fund, $640,000. That would then offset the loss in sales tax revenue from the grocery tax. We wouldn't be carrying a benefit. We wouldn't be carrying two debt issuances where sales tax is a pledged revenue source to pay it back. And then also by paying it off 5 years early, we'd save on the long run $226,000 in saved interest payments.
I have a question.
Yep.
Can you put the slide back up that shows the different years?
These ones,
That
yeah.
one. So if we did the 13 million and the 20-year payment goes down to $1,043,000, would that eliminate most of the savings we'd see from paying off the police department early? Or would we still see some savings with
I'm so-
that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So would we still be able to pay down the debt on the police department if we went down to the 13 million debt amount?
Yeah, I mean, we're going down to the $13 million debt. It would just basically mean that's more money we're using out of our cash on hand, we're using out of our capital projects fund. So, and you see on this last column,
But when I look at, not to interrupt, but when I look at what we're saving, paying off the police department, it's 225,000 over 5 years, which is 60,000 a year versus doing this $1 million more. It looks like we'd be saving a lot more just in, the debt payments on the public utilities versus the debt payments of 50,000 on the police department. I'd like to maximize our debt payment savings if we can.
it's certainly an option we can look at. I mean, it was kind of a combination looking at maximizing the reserve and the debt payment, but yeah, we can look at some other options too. Yeah.
Do you want to go back to
Yeah.
that slide? Right there. So typically what we've done in the last few years is we've transferred general fund surpluses into the capital fund. So regardless of what money we put towards the debt of the building, the money that we have on hand, just the 2.5 million, if you had that 1.9 and $600,000, that's money that would probably be transferred into our capital fund by the end of May. So that's 2.5 million right there. And as Jason was saying, is the debt service fund already has a cash balance of $300,000 from refinancing in the past or whatnot. So the only thing you're seeing is you're only taking 187,000 out of anything that would be remotely operational, which is our capital fund. And our capital fund has $12 million in reserve. So you're taking 187,000 out of $12 million. So the thing about having cash on hand in the capital fund is sometimes projects are a lot more than you expect. Like the Tanner Trail Sewer project we're doing right now is supposed to be $1.2 million and it's almost $3 million. So the staff for the $100,000 a year in payment, the flexibility of having an extra $1 million on hand, just in case that project came in high, was one of the reasons why we suggested the middle tier. But obviously whatever the board wants, we can, either one's works.
The other thing I was thinking too, I mean, has this been based on what we are anticipating the expansion of our retail base to be? Because the auto mall is expanding. We've got a lot of new retail. We've got a lot more residents who've moved in, which means our retail base, our taxes on retail should be going up. So, I mean, if there's any way we could do the 13 versus the 14 million, because it seems like every time we take a look at our sales tax revenue, it gets revised up. I don't recall.
Yeah, the issue with that is you had two things though, conservatively. You have the auto mall, which isn't touched by the new referendum tax. There's that tax doesn't go on the auto sales. And so then you have the other aspect of the referendum, which doesn't affect grocery sales. And then you actually have the elimination of the grocery tax, losing 700,000 right off the bat in the sales tax revenue every year. So our sales tax numbers, luckily for us, because the grocery tax wasn't touched by the referendum estimates, our referendum estimates never really changed. So that would have been huge if, let's say, that 1.4 million that we estimated was going to include groceries, because if it did, that number would drop dramatically. But right now, because groceries aren't touched by that referendum, we know that we can have 1.2 to 1.4 million in hand. But like I said, the board can pick whichever option you want. What I would tell you is, just to put it in historical perspective, years ago, now I don't have it in front of me, but call it 10 years ago when I started, I want to say the reserve in the capital fund was only about two and a half, maybe $3 million. So keeping 5 or 6 million is definitely more than we've had in the past. But then again, it also does give us more operational flexibility in the future. But I agree with Jason, getting the police debt off, considering that almost all of it, 95% of it, is going to be paid off by surplus revenues or revenues that we don't use, like the debt fund, which is just sitting there as a balance. Getting it off the books takes the risk out of having two debts being paid at the same time off of sales tax.
So some next steps here is, obviously we have the land swap agreement that needs to get approved. Then we need to finalize the public works building, the plans, then begin the bid process. On the debt side, we'll need to hire a financial advisor and debt counsel and bond counsel. And then for the village board, there's few actions that, should we proceed with this, we hold a bond issue notification act hearing, then we'd adopt a bond authorizing ordinance, and we'd have the bond sale, and then adopt the bond ordinance. So basically, I've been told around 3 months. So when we start that process to when we actually get the money, the bond proceeds to start paying or beginning, about 3 months.
And I should say one thing too, and I always do this, one more thing. Bonds can be refinanced if rates go down. So, this is projected at 5%. If rates drop, we can always go back and reissue bonds.
All right, anything? All right, moving on to item 3, Steve.
Thank you. Item number 3 is the petition for, it's a PUD, so it's a plan unit development request. The petitioner is the village, and we are looking, this is has to do with the potential land swap with the Southern Kane County Training Association. This is to utilize their current location for a new public works building while leaving our building intact on our current property. Nathan had this at the Plan Commission. So tonight's meeting is basically a recap of the Plan Commission and discussion with the board about the site plan, questions you might have about the restrictions, requirements, everything that's being asked for. And then if there are no concerns or you feel that there's only a few small things to add, it would then get moved to May 6th for approval.
I think it's fine. So good evening, everyone. As you may know, there's a public works building being built. So we had the planning commission meeting at the last meeting, and the PUD ordinance has 4 items to it. So the first one is a rezoning. So our current property is zoned actually I2. So the 2 properties currently have different zonings. Our current property is zoned I2. The SKCTA property is zoned I1. So first item would be to rezone our property down to I1, so all the properties match in zoning. Public works facility and training facilities are permitted uses in I1, so no problem there. Here is the site plan. So the second item that would be approved is a special use for planned unit development. There are several code exceptions included as part of this site plan. And most of those are because we're creating these new property lines you can see through here. And because of how we had to fit everything in, some of those property lines are pretty close to existing buildings. So the list is in your packet, but it's minimum lot width here. It's the rear setback of the existing building. It's the side setback there. So there's a list called out of code exceptions in the PUD. Another one is for parking. Like our parking calculation is based on square footage. So here's the inside of the building. There's the office areas. This whole part of the building is parking. So our zoning code requirement based on square footage would be a parking requirement for a parking lot. So that gets to be a huge number, which is obviously not needed. And then just calling out the training center's existing facilities down there. Some of their burn towers and things are taller than the height limit. So calling everything out that they're doing as legal things to do in the PUD. We would also approve the site plan and approve a plat as part of that ordinance. So just like, you know, a normal development process where you have all those things in the ordinance, we would have all those in. Planning Commission saw it, recommended approval. There are a couple suggestions. Was one to have the you know, landscaping of the old and new building try to match. Front all looks nice across the whole thing. Two, and look at you know, the gate here as you're coming in and make sure that that's screened, because this is still the entrance to the strip mall right there to the east. Staff added the condition, and the training center knows about this. That circle is the well setback set by the IEPA. So no training activities in that setback without our permission. So basically don't burn anything that's going to put pollutants into the well. With that, the applicant is here, Brian. So if you have any questions for him, we can bring him up to the podium if you'd like.
I wish I had a question.
It should be pointed out that on this site plan, we actually presented two site plans. If you may have seen or remember a first site plan that showed that Hammerhead Road, we call it, at the southern end of the property where their training facility is. Right now, they're still making some final decisions. There was one site plan where the existing road just kind of stays where it was. And then as part of the land swap agreement, we would give them gravel throughout the site. It sounds like they prefer for essentially the same cost. They would rather us build a road instead, because that's what we do. And they don't build roads, but they said we can lay gravel at any time, but we don't know how to build a road. So that was designed in-house. So that's with our engineers, and that's what we came up with. And so far, you know, it sounds like they like the road option better. That's why we showed this one. Otherwise, the site itself is relatively the same. We just wanted to show what the most updated one is.
Any questions on the board? All right, thanks, Nathan. All right, item 4, Steve.
Okay, item number 4, the last item on the agenda is another special use case, and this is for Connect Wellness. It is a marijuana dispensary. Connect just went through the Plan Commission process, so Nathan's going to walk us through that. The purpose of them being here tonight is, as you know, Verilife, the current dispensary at 161 South Lincoln Way, is relocating probably very soon, within the next couple of weeks, out to the intersection of Oak and Orchard. And once that move is made, their spot will be vacated. The village does allow 2 dispensaries, and as long as they meet the buffer requirements. So clearly this met the buffer requirements because there's an existing dispensary. So someone is now petitioning to kind of backfill that space once they move out. With that, Nathan's going to walk us through. You ask questions, and if you have any concerns, you know, the process will be either moving it forward to the next board meeting or bringing it back for more information.
Okay, Connect Wellness going at 161 South Lincoln Way, the existing site. Just, you know, the history is in your packet, but, you know, PharmaCann was there since 2014. 2020, they began adult use cannabis dispensing.
Jason, could you pull
2022,
your mic down a little bit?
Sure. In 2022, they got an approval to expand their facility. They never actually built the expansion though. It did come in here and get voted on, but they're still just in that original unit. They never actually did the work. And then, you know, currently they're heading out to the site on Orchard. That building, we did give it a CO, so it's ready. I don't know the exact date that they're opening up, but it should be any time now. So with that, the petitioner, CW Dispensary, is looking to go back into the same spot. They would be requesting all 3 units. So 301, unit 301, 302, and 304. So this is the original area and the expansion area that got approved. So originally they planned to start out in the existing original area and then eventually move on to the expansion into the, you know, the larger plan. That expansion would happen, you know, a year, 18 months, something in that time period. They currently plan to employ 15 to 20 people. I'm going to invite them up here in a sec to give a little more information on the business. but just, you know, the existing site would remain as is. There is no specific parking requirement for cannabis, so it's just general retail parking requirements. And by our code, that would require 14 spaces. The site has 149 spaces, including the front and the back. And they are reserving 15 just for the dispensary. We did go to the planning commission. There are a few just general conditions recommended for the PUD. And it's the general ones that we've had pretty much in every cannabis one. So no on-site consumption, you know, make sure you're managing parking, all those types of things. With that, I am going to bring the applicant up, and they have a few slides to tell you a little bit about their business. One other thing I would say is this is their logo. And so that is what the signs will look like. So I know we've had discussion on signage before, so that is what you should expect to see on their signage. So if you have questions about that, but first, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Nathan. I think you covered most of it, but my name's David Michaud. I'm an attorney by background. In the last 4 years, I've been working on some cannabis applications and building up a different business in Franklin Park, where we have a craft grow facility. We became operational in August. I'd say about 3 years ago, I also purchased the building at 161 Lincoln Way. So I have a non-coincidental connection to this property, where we're the landlord, and we, you know, significantly have a vested interest in the success of our business interest in cannabis, our real estate interest there, and our our presence in the community. So we are CW Dispensary 1 would be a wholly owned subsidiary of Connect Wellness. This would be a net benefit to our other business, and it would be so both businesses would benefit from having the relationship. Currently, our other cultivation business sells to dispensaries that are unrelated, and this would give us an outlet to sell our products that we grow in Franklin Park, manufacture in Franklin Park. There's a cap on how much products any one dispensary can purchase from somebody else, which is 40%. So there's a state wants there to be a diversity of products at every store. So we would still be supporting other growers as well, not just our own products, but it would provide an additional, a specific outlet for our other businesses. Here are some slides on what we've sort of been in the public spotlight for. We raised money to build out our other business. The middle slide has to do with the VA, the CBOC that's at 161 Lincoln Way. We are fully funding that project. Eventually we will get reimbursed, but we're funding about a $1.7 million project currently, where the VA is expanding. VA is at 161 South Lincoln Way, and they are expanding by 4,200 square feet. We're building it out. Should be done in probably late Q2, but we're happy to support that. It's certainly an interesting building with the VA there and a dispensary there, plus some other businesses, but it's a good building. So we're here to ask for the second special use. We have a good relationship with Verilife as well. Hopefully this would help with to generate some additional tax revenue for Village. And that's, I'm open to any questions.
Sounds good.
Good.
I got nothing.
Anybody else?
Nope, good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back next meeting for a final vote.
Okay.
All right, thank you. It includes our 4 discussion items. Motion to adjourn to exec session to discuss land acquisition and sale of property / land acquisition.
So moved.
In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same. All right. Thank you.